Welcome to the practical part of the lesson. This is the practical project. I have built a project called Rugby League. However, the way I've designed this code, I will show you that you can use this code to track any other sports. I just used it for the convenience of having access to statistics. There is a special reason that I've built this project so that we can explore how to use enums in a different way to what we saw in the lessons and reinforce our knowledge on enums. For those who want to build this project and use it the same way that I have with the same class names, take a screen copy of this page, as they may have taken down the statistics, and at least you'll have the statistics. Let me explain what we want to track. So we want to take the games played, the games won, the games drawn, and the games lost. And we also want to track the total points that these 4 teams have got. Now, as I said, you can call this project Sports League. And if you do that, then you can use it to track any sport. I've just wanted an example and I called it Rugby League. Now, if we look at this class diagram, you will see the relationship of the classes. The main class is going to be called Sports League. In your case, in my case, it will be called Rugby League. And Rugby League will call one class, and that's the Rugby Helper. In your case, the Sports Helper class. And the Sports Helper class has got 2 dependencies. It's got a dependency on the CSV utilities, which it uses to create a spreadsheet, and the CSV utilities has a dependency on the files utility class, which it uses to write the spreadsheet files to disk. The helper class also has a dependency on the capture class, and the capture class has a dependency on the pojo. In fact, the capture class is going to make an instance of the pojo class, and it's going to use the keyboard input-output so that we can display to the screen and capture the values. You will see that in the code. This is similar to Lesson 4's project, but there is some new things added to this, new features, new enhancements. And with that, let's go and delve into the code. Now, you probably have noticed I'm using Linux here. However, I'm running it on Windows, just by the by. So there's the classes that we want. If we look at the class diagram, we have to build them in the reverse order. So the first one we build is the one that has no dependencies, and that's the pojo. Then we build the capture class once we've built that. Now the helper class also has dependencies on the CSV, which has a dependency on this. So after the capture, we will build this class and then build this class. When I say build, we will create the classes and compile them. And then having done that, then we can build the helper class. You can call it the sports helper. I will call it the Rugby League helper, just by the by. And then the main class after that. So let's go back into the code. Here is the pojo class. I called it Rugby League Pojo. The class name is Rugby League Pojo. You will call it Sports League. Be careful that when you copy my code, you rename the class, because you want to create a class with a file name sportleague.pojo. And remember, the class name must be the same as the file name. So you need to make that change. But get the code from the repository, open up the Rugby League pojo.java class, copy the code into, you can use Notepad like I have, copy the code into Notepad, and even the command. You see Notepad Rugby League Pojo. If you run that command in Windows, it will do this. And save it. File, save, file, exit. And now we want to compile it. We've captured the Pojo, now we want to the capture class. So let's say Notepad. Now do the same. Create a class called Rugby League Capture. If you want to, you can call it Sports League Capture. Then the file name must be sportsleaguecapture.java. So you will run sportsleaguecapture.java. Right, copy and paste the code. As we said, the source is in the link below. Open the repository. Having done that, next. Now we want to create the file utility. This class remains the same name, so go and type that command there, notepad file utilities.java, get the code, paste it in. And now we compile it. That compiled. Having done that, let's see what, oh yes, the next one is CSV. Well, that you can copy straight from the screen. So you're creating the class CSV utilities. The file name is CSV utilities Java. You can pause the video and just copy that in, or take it from the source code. Now let's compile this. We need to look at the enum. The enum is called teamnames.java. Create an enum called teamnames. The file name is teamnames.java. Now this is interesting. Java classes and enums, they are both Java files. And you will discover that an enum is a special kind of a class because it has a constructor and it has methods. Here is the constructor of this enum. But notice that these are private. In Java, your constructors are public. Usually they're public. Sometimes we declare the default constructor as private. But here, the overridden constructor is private. So it gets called internally. So you see, when we create blues, we're creating a constant called blues, and we're passing it a nicely formatted text, blues, and the same here with Crusaders, a nicely formatted text. And what we are doing is blues is actually calling the constructors, and this nicely formulated text is passed as name. So the name is nicely formulated, and then we have a string called name, and we are setting the name there. And then we have a getter method, getName, and you're going to see that we use getName to get the value out. So now we want to compile this. But just before we do that, so you create the enum called teamnames and take the code out of the repository and create a file called teamnames.java. Remember, it's the same name except that it's an enum, it's not a class. Okay, let's compile it. and that compiled. I just want to show you where we're using it. In the helper clause, we are creating an array of pojos, and I've called it 4 pojos. And the index of 0 addresses the first element. So the first element here, we want to call a method, capture team, and we want to pass it the team name. Remember, there's the enum blues, get name. So it's going to pass it a pretty formatted blues with a capital B, nicely formatted text. And then we're doing the same for the next one when we populate the blues, the chiefs, and the crusaders. Now that we've done that, now we can build the helper clause. Same thing, you will call this Sports League Helper, and you will make the file name Sports League Helper. And just remember that any references inside here to Rugby League you will need to change. So here where it says Rugby League Pojo, you will need to change that. So you can do that with Control H. Control H does a replace, and you can do that with all the classes if you want to call it Sports League. Otherwise, build it as Rugby League, and then afterwards you can change the names, or just make another project and just copy out the names. Right, enough said. Let's compile it. And that compiled. Now that we've done that, now if we look at our class diagram, we've created these classes. Now we can build the helper class, and we've done that. If we look at the class diagram now, we've built all these classes around the helper class and the helper. Now we can build the main class. So there it is. So you can create the class name Rugby League, file name rugbyleague.java. You might as well pause the video because there's only basically 3 lines of code in there. Just copy and paste that in, pause the video, and by magic of time travel, we can now compile it. And now that we've compiled it, we are now ready to run it, but I would like to do something before we run it. I just want to go through certain parts of the class diagram. So let's go and look at the Pojo. And I can explain it from here. So this Pojo has these fields of these class variables. In a Pojo, we refer to them as fields. And then it has 2 special methods. This method is used to create the header of the spreadsheet. The header has the column names. And you can see we're just passing strings with the names of the columns. And then this method here, we are passing the values inside these fields. So we are generating a string, and that's what we are returning. And the same here, we are generating the header string. Here we are generating the body string. And you will see we will use this every time we write to the spreadsheet. So the first time we will call the make header method, because in the first time we want to write the column names. After that, every time we call this Pojo to be populated, we will only call the make body method. And then we have mentioned in the lesson about getters and setters. So the getter is a method that has get in front of the field name, and setters are methods that have a set in front of the field name. Notice the field name here is MAME. Please change that on your side. I can't change it on my side. Otherwise, I will break the code at this point in time. I don't have the time now to sit and fix this. So, something else I'd like to point out. You see the games played. the variable name always starts with a lowercase g. And the same with method names, they always start with a lowercase s, lowercase g. But now, games played, what we do is in front of the field name, we put a get to create a getter method, and the same we put a set to create a setter method. And notice that the name now starts with the uppercase, whereas over here the name started with the lowercase. That's something because the rule is when we create methods and variables, the first letter is lowercase, but every other first letter of every other word is uppercase. That's called camel case. Right, enough said about that. Let's close this file. Now we want to look at the capture class. Now the capture class, what happens here, we are going to call the reader read line. You may remember that brings us a string. And then we are going to do a parse int. The integer parse int will turn that text into an integer value, or it will throw an exception. So if the value is valid, we will return it. If not, we don't return zeros. This is not C++. Java is more sophisticated. When we return a value, it's always the correct value, or we throw an exception. So you always know that your value is correct. Unlike C++, you have to check for a zero. And we have basically 5 integers, and we're going to just call this method 5 times to populate these values. And then when we've done that, we now have the values in these fields, and then we're going to use the setter method of the POJO to populate those values into the POJO. And here I instantiated the POJO. Now remember, if you're going to call this sports league, then you got to go through every class and rename every rugby league into sports league. The onus is on you to do that. Close this class. So that class is either going to give us a valid POJO with valid values, or it's going to throw an exception. That's nice, because if I get values, I can trust them. Now that's the command to list all Java. Let's see what we've done. We've gone through the utilities, we've gone through the capture. Now we want to look at the helper class. Copy. So, what are we doing here? First of all, you're going to see that in this class we're using an array. So we've got 4 indexes there from 0 to 3. And we are going to call the capture method, and we're passing it the team names, and you'll notice that I'm going to be using the team names.get. So here's an example of an array, but this is not an array of your normal types, int, string, double, things like that. This is an array of POJO. You see that? Rugby league POJO, sports league POJO. And I've called this variable 4 POJOs because that's what I'm populating. And then, if all goes well, we will have all the sports captured for all the teams in one go. And then here we are going to iterate through a loop, because that's what you can do with arrays. You can iterate them in a for loop. And then the index is going to be I to get back the value of that particular POJO stored in there, so that we can save it. And then we are going to do the same again. We're going to call that, and here we're going to say get name. It should be name, but remember I named my thing get name, MAME. And then I'm storing team name. It should be team name. Okay, but the code still works, believe it or not. So, and then here points earned, the same thing. It's an integer. So here I'm able to print the result for that team, the name and the points earned. and it's iterating through all those themes. So it'll produce four lists. We will see that in the code. And then at this stage here, when we call the save, here we are calling this method, and this method is getting a pojo, which is exactly what we have stored in the arrays. We have an array of pojos. So we are getting one pojo and we are calling this each time. So we're going to call this method 4 times. And then I've called the local variable that I'm passing here to this method, that I'm calling that variable pojo lowercase. What I'm doing here is I'm checking to see if that pojo is a null. In other words, a null means that there's no data in that pojo. And then I will print this message. Pojo is null, and then I do a return. Now you're going to say, this dude is mad. He's got a void method and he's trying to return something. But look, there's nothing there. There's no variable there. It's just a return. And Java recognizes this. So this is the go to jail ticket if you're playing Monopoly, or the get out of jail ticket. That's the get out of jail ticket. Now, at this point in time, when we've passed this get out of jail, that means that we have valid code here and we have valid data. I know we have valid data because over here, if any of these had invalid data, it would go to the catch block. So in the sad case, any one of these has invalid data, we go to the catch block. So that will happen before we loop through this to save. So at that stage there, any one of these is invalid, we go to the catch block. But okay, let's carry on explaining this. So then we are going to also check if the CSV file exists. And we are using the CSV file name, which is a class variable and a constant. Class variable at the top and a constant. Look, it's a final variable. It means you can't change it. And another way that you can see that is the names. CSV file name are all in uppercase and separated by underscores. So that's how we declare a constant. That is a constant. Right, enough said. And we use that, and we have a method in the file utilities class that will look for this. And if it exists, it will return us true. And in that case, if exists, we are going to now we want to append the file because the file exists. If the file doesn't exist, that's fine. Now we want to create a new file. So when the CSV utilities write CSV file is called, it calls the file utilities write file, which you may remember in the second lesson. That gave us an ability to write files to disk, a new file, or rewrite a new file to disk. So that's making this save method intelligent. And then also, in the event where we're trying to write these files and something happened, in the catch block, because I've already tested that CSV exists, I'm able to display the right message, fail to append. Error is, and then we will get the error out of the exception here, the get message. Or if it didn't exist, fail to write new file, error is, and it will give us the error. And one last thing, in the previous lesson I mentioned, you will notice that the methods in this is a static. Because this method is a static method, the class that calls this method does not need to instantiate this class. And the same will happen over here. Notice, you see, I have an uppercase rugby league capture, because the capture team method in the capture class is also a static method. I'm just reminding you so you can see. This is the benefit when you make libraries and you make the methods to be static. So you see static method here in this class. Right. And then lastly, I just want to see the code for the main method. So likewise there, you see rugby league helper dot capture. You see that is a static method. So that's how we called it. Right. Now let's run this. Java. Notice now we don't put file extensions. At this point in time, I hope you have learned that. So you can see it's now capturing the blues. I'm just going to give it bogus values. Games played 11, games won 2, games lost 5, and lost 6. Points earned 22. Next one, Brumbies. Games played 11, won 7, drawn 2, and lost 1. No, 2. Points earned 33. And Chiefs, games played 11, won 11, 10, draw 1, lost 1, 34. Crusaders, games played 10, won 8, drew 1, lost 1, points earned 20. And there you are. Now let's have a look and see what happened to the CSV file. So here's the CSV file. We can look at it, cat. And you can see that I've actually captured 3 times. So it has preserved the previous records, and there's nothing wrong with the result. Now if I can open this, documents. Remember we said my Java projects. Where are you hiding? My Java apps. So let's go and open this. It should open in Excel. Double click. Just spread them out nicely so we can read the fields. And there you have it. So these were the column names. In the Pojo, remember, we had that special method to create the column names. And then we had another special method to create one row of data. So because we called that 4 times in the app, it gave us Blues, Brumbies, Chiefs, Crusaders. We called it again, and we called it again. That's what we captured now. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I hope that this was useful to you. Please click the like button and also subscribe to this channel to help this channel grow. Have a look in the comments. Click on the show more link so that you can see what other videos we have in this series of training courses. Thank you for that.